Imagine discovering that for 8 years your husband has been ashamed of you, that he attends London's most exclusive events alone, making up excuses for why his wife never shows up. And worse, that there's another woman he's been introducing as his new wife to all of high society. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Eleanor Davies, a woman from a small English town who uncovered the most brutal truth about her marriage. And what she did with that discovery will leave you speechless. This is a story of revenge, transformation, and a public confrontation that brought reputations crashing down in the London elite. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more incredible stories of redemption and revenge. Eleanor Davies always knew something was wrong, but she could never put her finger on it. On a chilly November morning in London, she looked out the window of her elegant Kensington apartment, watching well-dressed executives walk down the street toward the financial district offices. She felt the familiar weight of the loneliness that had been her companion for years. The apartment was immaculate, decorated with the same discreet good taste that Alexander, her husband, always demanded. Italian designer furniture, neutral tones, everything coordinated to reflect the status of a successful executive. But Eleanor felt like a stranger in her own home, a temporary guest in a hotel too expensive for her. Alexander Montgomery had left early, as he always did. At 42, he was a managing partner at Montgomery and Associates, a business consultancy that served some of the biggest corporations in England. Tall, with perfectly trimmed graying hair, and always impeccable in his bespoke Savile Row suits, Alexander was the type of man who commanded immediate respect the moment he entered a room. Eleanor, at 34, was the complete opposite. From a small town in the north of England, she had moved to London at 20 to study languages at the University of London. That's where she met Alexander at a graduation party. He was already established professionally. She was a young dreamer, fascinated by city life. Their courtship was a fairy tale. Alexander wooed her with a sophistication she had never experienced. Dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekends in the Cotswolds, expensive gifts that made her blush. Eleanor felt like Cinderella, a simple girl elevated to a world of luxury and refinement that had always seemed inaccessible. They married 2 years later in a small but elegant ceremony at a historic London church. Eleanor wore a simple but beautiful dress she bought with her student savings. Alexander paid for the reception at a luxurious private estate in the Cotswolds for 50 carefully selected guests, all from his social and professional circles. In the early years of their marriage, Eleanor still held out hope of integrating into Alexander's world. She studied etiquette, learned about fine wines, and tried to develop an interest in contemporary art. But gradually, Alexander began to discourage her from attending social events. "You'd be bored, my dear," he would say whenever they received invitations to charity galas, exhibition openings, or business dinners. They're very formal events, full of business talk you don't know anything about. You'd rather stay home with your books, wouldn't you? And Eleanor believed him, or wanted to believe him. She accepted the excuses because the alternative, that her own husband was ashamed of her, was too unthinkable to confront. She specialized in technical and literary translation, working as a freelancer for small publishers and companies. It was a job she could do from home, alone, without disrupting Alexander's social schedule. Slowly, Eleanor became invisible, even to herself. That November morning, while tidying Alexander's study for the cleaning lady, Eleanor found something that would change her life forever, a golden envelope forgotten among some business contracts. It was an invitation to the annual London Art Foundation Charity Gala, one of the city's most prestigious events, held at the sumptuous V&A Museum. The invitation was dated 3 weeks ago. Eleanor remembered that night perfectly. Alexander had said he had a tedious business dinner with German clients and had returned home at 3 in the morning. With her heart racing, Eleanor grabbed her laptop and searched for the event. Immediately, dozens of social photos appeared on London's high society news sites. Photos of elegant couples, stunning women in gowns, distinguished men in tuxedos. And then, she saw him, Alexander, radiant in his impeccable tuxedo, with his arm wrapped around the waist of a woman Eleanor had never seen. A spectacular blonde, around 28 years old, wearing a red dress that cost more than Eleanor's annual salary. She was tall, slim, with the kind of polished beauty that only money can buy. The photo caption hit her like a punch to the gut. The businessman Alexander Montgomery and his companion, the model and digital influencer, Chloe Bennett, at the London Art Foundation Gala. Eleanor clicked frantically on more photos. Alexander and Chloe toasting with Dom Perignon. Alexander whispering something in her ear while she laughed. Alexander introducing her to other couples from his social circle with evident pride. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened Chloe Bennett's Instagram. The profile had 30,000 to 40,000 followers and was a showcase of obscene luxury. Photos on yachts in the French Riviera, trips to the Caribbean, Hermes bags, sports cars, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. In several recent photos, Eleanor recognized details that shattered her. The Rolex watch Alexander said a client had given him. The pearl necklace that mysteriously appeared in her jewelry box 6 months ago, when Alexander said it was a surprise anniversary gift. The exotic flowers that arrived at their home by mistake from the florist. Everything was being bought for Chloe with money that should have been theirs. Eleanor continued her investigation with the obsession of someone who needs to know the full extent of their own humiliation. She discovered that Alexander and Chloe frequented London's most exclusive restaurants together. She found photos of them at events that happened while Alexander was supposedly on business trips, a weekend in the Cotswolds, another in the French Riviera. The worst discovery came when Eleanor found an interview with Chloe in a London fashion magazine, published 2 months earlier. In the article, Chloe spoke vaguely but revealingly about her love life. "I've been with a wonderful man for over a year," Chloe said. "He's older, very successful, and he treats me like a queen. It's different from any relationship I've ever had. He has a maturity and stability that makes me feel secure." When asked about marriage, Chloe replied, "Well, his situation is complicated. He was married, but he was already emotionally separated for a long time when we met. Now it's just a matter of time before everything becomes official." Eleanor read those words, feeling her world collapse around her. Alexander had told Chloe they were separated. For over a year, while sleeping in the same bed as Eleanor, kissing her every morning before work, and making love to her on lazy weekends, he was building a complete parallel life. It wasn't just an affair. It was a serious, public, acknowledged relationship, at least to everyone but Eleanor. She ran to the bathroom and was sick. Then she sat on the cold floor, crying until she had no more tears. When she finally got up and looked in the mirror, she saw a woman she didn't recognize. Her eyes were swollen, her face was stained, and she had the expression of someone who had just discovered that her entire life was a lie. What would you do if you were in Eleanor's shoes? Share your opinion in the comments below. Alexander came home at 7 in the evening, as he always did. He kissed Eleanor's cheek distractedly, as he always did. He asked what was for dinner, as he always did. It was as if nothing had changed, as if Eleanor's world hadn't just crumbled. During dinner, Eleanor watched him, as if she were seeing him for the first time. The calculated way he spoke about his day, carefully omitting any detail that could connect him to Chloe. The way he avoided her gaze. The way his phone constantly vibrated with messages that he discreetly checked, always with a small smile on his lips. After dinner, Alexander said he needed to review some contracts in his study and closed the door. Eleanor knew he was talking to Chloe. That night, lying beside the man who had been cheating on her for over a year, Eleanor made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't confront Alexander immediately. First, she would uncover the whole truth. And after, she would make Alexander pay for every humiliation, for every lie, for every moment he made her feel inadequate while he built a fairy tale life with another woman. The following days were a descent into the hell of progressive discovery. Eleanor became a detective in her own life, and every new piece of evidence was like a deeper stab at her already shattered self-esteem. She started by checking their joint bank statements, which she had always had access to, but had never used because she trusted him completely. What she found made her nauseous. In the past 18 months, Alexander had spent almost £80,000 on client entertainment and business trips. But Eleanor was able to trace many of these transactions. Dinners at London's most expensive restaurants for 2 people, shopping on Bond Street at Prada and Gucci, weekends at a luxury hotel in the Cotswolds, always booked for a couple. There was even a £15,000 transaction at Tiffany & Company. On the same date, Chloe had posted a picture of a diamond bracelet with the caption, "Special gift from someone special." But the financial discoveries were just the beginning. Eleanor found a search history on the couple's shared iPad that Alexander had forgotten to delete. Romantic hotels Cotswolds, exclusive restaurants French Riviera, jewelry for a 28-year-old, how to end a marriage without losing money. The last search was dated just 2 months before. Alexander wasn't just cheating. He was planning to leave her. One afternoon, when Alexander said he was at an all-day off-site meeting, Eleanor decided to follow him. She took a taxi to his office on Bond Street. Alexander left at 2 in the afternoon, not by car, but on foot, walking toward the West End. Eleanor followed him, keeping her distance, her heart beating so hard she was sure other people on the street could hear. Alexander entered Burlington Arcade and headed to a classic London cafe. Chloe was already waiting for him. Eleanor hid behind a marble column and watched a scene that completely destroyed her. Alexander and Chloe greeted each other with a passionate kiss, the kind that leaves no doubt about their intimacy. They sat at a reserved table, clearly regulars. Eleanor could see them talking animatedly. Alexander laughed in a way she hadn't heard him laugh in years. His eyes sparkled when he looked at Chloe. He held her hand across the table, playing with her fingers, treating her with a tenderness Eleanor had forgotten existed. At one point, Alexander pulled a small blue Tiffany box from his pocket and handed it to Chloe. She opened it with a look of genuine ecstasy and put what looked like a ring on the ring finger of her right hand. It wasn't an engagement ring. Alexander was still married after all, but it was clearly a promise of a future. Eleanor watched for almost 2 hours. She saw how Alexander treated Chloe like a queen, how he hung on her every word, how he looked at her with an adoration he had never shown Eleanor. It was obvious that he was deeply in love, and that, in a way, hurt more than the betrayal itself. Eleanor could have dealt with a soulless sexual affair, but Alexander had fallen in love with another woman and built with her the kind of relationship that Eleanor had always dreamed of having with him. On the way back home in the taxi, Eleanor cried silently, watching the streets of London pass by the window. The city that had once been synonymous with her dreams now seemed like a cemetery of lost illusions. That night, Alexander arrived home at 7:30, half an hour later than usual. He said the meeting had run long, and he was exhausted. They ate dinner in silence, as had become their custom over the past few years. Eleanor watched him discreetly and noticed the signs she had always ignored. The way he constantly checked his phone, always turning the screen down when someone messaged him. the way he took a shower immediately upon arriving home to relax from the workday, the way his clothes sometimes smelled of a woman's perfume, which he explained away as being from clients or co-workers. After dinner, Alexander said he needed to work late at home. Eleanor went to the bedroom and pretended to be asleep. Around 11 at night, she heard Alexander talking quietly on the phone in his study. She got out of bed silently and approached the door. "No, love. You know it's not like that," Alexander was whispering. "It's complicated. Eleanor, she's fragile. If I ask for a divorce now, she might have a meltdown. You don't know her. She's completely dependent on me." There was a pause. "Of course I want to be with you officially. You are the woman of my life. But I need to do this the right way, gradually. She needs to get used to the idea." Another pause. "I know it's hard for you too, but darling. I know you deserve more than having to hide me. But think about what we've achieved together in this time. Your career has taken off. And when we're officially together, I'll make sure all of London society knows you're my woman." Eleanor leaned against the hallway wall, her legs trembling. Alexander wasn't just planning to leave her. He was strategizing to do it in a way that minimized any damage to his social or professional reputation. "Next week is the Prada Foundation event," Alexander continued. "I'll take you as always. And who knows, it might be a good opportunity to start talking more openly about our future together." Eleanor returned to the bedroom with a broken heart. She lay in the bed she shared with a man who saw her as an obstacle to his happiness, a burden he needed to get rid of carefully so as not to harm his image. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Eleanor felt something other than pain. She felt rage, a cold, calculated anger that began to burn in her chest like a slow but constant fire. Alexander thought she was too fragile to handle the truth. He thought she was too dependent to survive without him. He thought he could manipulate the situation to come out as the good guy who cared for a problematic wife until he found a suitable solution. Eleanor smiled in the dark. Alexander was about to discover just how wrong he was about the woman he had married. Eleanor woke up the next morning with a mental clarity she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since the discovery, she didn't cry. She didn't feel the familiar weight of depression. Instead, she felt something much more powerful: determination. While Alexander took a shower, humming, probably planning another rendezvous with Chloe, Eleanor made a plan. She wouldn't confront Alexander immediately. That would give him control of the situation, allowing him to manipulate the narrative in his favor. Instead, Eleanor would do something Alexander would never expect. She would transform into the woman he always said she wasn't sophisticated enough to be. She began by investigating all the social events Alexander had attended without her over the past 2 years. She discovered an impressive pattern: charity galas, exhibition openings, business dinners, luxury product launch parties. All events where the presence of an elegant wife was not only expected, but essential to maintaining social status. Alexander had taken Chloe to every one of these events, introducing her sometimes as a friend, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes as a +1. But Eleanor knew, from the comments she found on social media, that everyone in their social circle knew exactly what the nature of their relationship was. The most shocking discovery came when Eleanor got access to Alexander's WhatsApp through their synchronized iPad. The conversations with Chloe revealed not only the extent of the betrayal, but also the cruelty with which Alexander spoke about Eleanor. "She's getting suspicious," Alexander had written to Chloe 3 weeks earlier. "She asked why I never take her to company events." "And what did you say?" Chloe had replied. "The truth. That she wouldn't know how to behave. That she'd be lost among sophisticated people. That it's better for everyone if she stays home, doing her little translations." Poor thing. It must be awful to be married to someone who's ashamed of you. It's not shame, my love. It's realism. Eleanor came from a very simple family. She never learned the social codes necessary for our world. It's like taking someone who only knows cheap table wine to a 1985 vintage tasting. Eleanor read these messages, feeling a mix of pain and indignation that surprised her with its intensity. Alexander wasn't just cheating. He despised her. He despised her origins, her simplicity, her authenticity. But there was more. "Sometimes I think about how different it would be if I had met you first," Alexander had written to Chloe. "You understand my world in a way Eleanor never will. When we're together at events, I feel proud. People congratulate me, admire my good taste. With Eleanor, I always feel like I'm doing her a favor." "When are you going to leave her officially?" Chloe had asked. "I'm waiting for the right moment. Eleanor doesn't have many resources of her own. If I file for divorce now, she could make trouble, hire expensive lawyers, try to harm me professionally. It's better to prepare the ground slowly." "What kind of preparation?" "Making her realize herself that we no longer work, that she takes the initiative to end it. That way, I'm the guy who tried to save his marriage, and you're the woman who helped me through a difficult separation." Alexander's calculated coldness was breathtaking. He had planned every detail of their marriage's destruction to preserve his reputation and maximize his chances with Chloe. Eleanor printed these conversations and carefully put them away. Then, she began the second phase of her plan. The transformation. Her first stop was on Bond Street, the most elegant street in London. She entered a Prada boutique and asked to speak with the most experienced personal shopper. "I need a complete transformation," Eleanor said to Marina, an elegant woman in her 50s, who immediately assessed Eleanor with professional eyes. "What kind of transformation, madam?" "I want to be unrecognizable. I want to become the type of woman who commands attention when she walks into a room." Marina smiled. "May I ask what the occasion is?" "Revenge," Eleanor replied without hesitation. They spent 3 hours in the boutique. Eleanor bought 2 cocktail dresses, a gala gown that cost more than her 6-month income as a translator, Louboutin shoes, bags, and accessories. She spent £25,000 from their joint account, money Alexander thought she didn't even know existed. Next, she went to the best salon in London. She asked for a complete makeover. "Cut off all the length," she told the hairdresser. "I want a short, modern, powerful bob. And I want highlights. I want to look like a woman who doesn't take excuses." The hairdresser, a dramatic man named Francesco, was enthusiastic about the project. "Oh, darling, you have an incredible bone structure. With the right cut, you'll be devastating." 5 hours later, Eleanor looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman she saw. The short hair perfectly framed her face, highlighting her green eyes and cheekbones. The golden highlights gave her a sophisticated glow she had never had. But the most important transformation was internal. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt beautiful, powerful, and worthy. She returned home carrying several shopping bags. Alexander hadn't arrived yet. He was probably with Chloe. Eleanor hid all the purchases in the guest room closet and went back to her research. She discovered that next week was the London Art Foundation's Winter Gala, one of the most important events of the London social season. According to Alexander's history, it was a sure thing that he would take Chloe. Eleanor researched the event and discovered that it was possible to buy individual tickets for $500. Without hesitation, she bought a ticket using her personal credit card. That night, when Alexander came home at 10:30 with the familiar scent of a woman's perfume on his clothes, Eleanor was in the kitchen making tea, seemingly the same submissive woman as always. "How was your day, my love?" Alexander asked, kissing her distractedly on the forehead. "Quiet," Eleanor replied. "I worked on some translations." "And you? How was the all-day meeting?" Alexander didn't notice the irony in her voice. "Tiring. German clients are always so demanding." Eleanor smiled internally. On Chloe's Instagram, posted 3 hours earlier, was a picture of a glass of Dom Perignon with the caption, "Celebrating new projects with my love." The location showed the Four Seasons Hotel in London. "Alexander," Eleanor said in the most innocent voice she could muster, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Why do you never take me to your company events? I'd like to meet your colleagues, understand your work better." Alexander was visibly uncomfortable. "Eleanor, we've talked about this. They're very formal events. You'd feel out of place. But what if I didn't? What if I wanted to try?" "Eleanor," Alexander sighed impatiently. "Look, I'll be honest with you. These events are about networking, about impressing clients, about maintaining professional relationships. The people there talk about contemporary art, international politics, complex business deals. Would you understand what they were talking about?" Every word was a deliberate humiliation. But Eleanor maintained a neutral expression. "You think I'm too stupid to follow a conversation about art or politics? It's not a matter of intelligence, Eleanor. It's a matter of environment. You weren't raised in that world. It's like taking someone who's never heard opera to La Scala. The person might be very intelligent, but they'll feel lost." Eleanor nodded, as if she understood and agreed. "You're right," she said softly. "I really wouldn't know how to behave in those sophisticated environments." Alexander seemed relieved that she had accepted the explanation so easily. "Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, my love. Everyone has their place in the world. Yours is here, taking care of our home, doing your translation work. That's what you're good at." That night, Eleanor lay beside Alexander, smiling in the dark. In 1 week, at the London Art Foundation Gala, Alexander would discover just how wrong he was about the woman he had married. And Chloe would find out what happens when you try to steal a husband from a woman who has finally decided to fight back. Eleanor woke up the following Monday with the determination of a general preparing for the final battle. She had exactly 6 days to transform herself completely, and every hour would be used strategically. Her first stop was a prestigious London business school, where she enrolled in an intensive course on social protocol and etiquette, taught by a former diplomat. The course, which normally lasted a month, would be condensed into 5 days for a select group of executives who needed to quickly learn the nuances of elite social behavior. "Mrs. Montgomery," said the teacher, Countess Isabella, a woman in her 60s with an aristocratic bearing and penetrating eyes. "I'll be direct. You have 5 days to learn what high society people learn their entire lives. There will be no time for subtleties or niceties. Let's get down to business." Eleanor absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. She learned about the London social hierarchy, how to identify important people by the way they dressed and behaved, and the appropriate conversation topics for each type of event. She learned about wine, not just the names, but the stories behind the labels, the production regions, the important vintages. The difference between someone who belongs to high society and someone who is faking it, the Countess explained, is not in what you know, but in how you react to what you don't know. A truly educated person never tries to impress with knowledge they don't possess. They ask intelligent questions and listen with genuine interest. Eleanor practiced conversations about contemporary art, international politics, and global economics. She learned the difference between confidence and arrogance, between elegance and ostentation. In parallel with the course, Eleanor went daily to London's most exclusive gym, where she hired a personal trainer who worked with models and actresses. "Madam," said Marco the trainer, "you have an incredible body structure. With the right work, in 1 week, you'll have the posture of an international model." They worked intensively on her posture, walk, and gestures. Eleanor learned to walk into a room as if she owned the place, to greet important people without looking intimidated, and to smile in a way that showed confidence without seeming arrogant. On the 4th day of her preparation, Eleanor did something she never thought she was capable of. She hired a private investigator. She wanted to be absolutely certain of every detail of Alexander's double life before the final confrontation. The investigator, a former police officer named Robert Farnese, delivered a report that surpassed even Eleanor's worst expectations. Alexander wasn't just cheating on her with Chloe for 18 months. He had created a completely parallel life. He had a rented apartment where he spent nights when he said he was working late. He had a separate bank account where he deposited some of his annual bonuses. He had even hired a divorce attorney 3 months prior, but the most devastating information was on the last pages of the report. Alexander had promised to marry Chloe in June of the following year. He had already reserved a church and a 5-star hotel for their honeymoon. He was planning to file for divorce from Eleanor right after the holidays, claiming irreconcilable differences and that they had grown in different directions. The lawyer had already developed a strategy to minimize the division of assets, exploiting the fact that Eleanor had not contributed significantly to the couple's wealth. Eleanor laughed bitterly as she read this information. Alexander truly thought she was a helpless fool who would accept whatever crumbs he offered. The day before the gala, Eleanor made her final preparations. She visited a high-end jewelry store, not to buy, but to learn. She talked to the manager about the most exclusive pieces in the collection, learned about the brand's history, the materials used, and the most important designers. "You have refined taste," the manager commented, when Eleanor demonstrated knowledge about a limited collection of rare diamonds. "Do you work in the jewelry field?" "No," Eleanor replied with an enigmatic smile. "Just a woman who is learning to value beautiful things." That night, on the eve of the gala, Alexander came home earlier than usual. He was visibly nervous, checking his phone constantly. "Are you okay, my love?" Eleanor asked with feigned concern. Yes, it's just, tomorrow there's an important company event. I might be late." "What kind of event?" Alexander hesitated for a moment. "A charity gala, very formal, very boring. You'd hate it." Eleanor nodded understandingly. "Of course, I hope everything goes well." That night, Eleanor took a long bath and looked at herself in the mirror one last time as the old Eleanor. The woman reflected back was already completely different from the one who had discovered the betrayal a week earlier. The modern haircut, the straight posture, the determined gaze, but most importantly, the confidence that radiated from within. On the morning of the gala, Alexander left early, saying he had meetings all day before the event. Eleanor knew he was spending the day with Chloe, helping her get ready, buying flowers, maybe even a special piece of jewelry for the occasion. Eleanor spent her day at an exclusive spa, a relaxing massage, a facial, a perfect manicure and pedicure. At 5 in the afternoon, she went to her salon for the final blow-dry and professional makeup. Francesco, the hairdresser who had done her transformation, was impressed with the final result. "Madonna mia, you're unrecognizable. You look like an international actress." The makeup artist, a French woman named Celine, who worked with celebrities, created a sophisticated but natural look, luminous skin, elegant eyes, and classic red lips that perfectly complemented the dress Eleanor would wear. At 7 in the evening, Eleanor was ready. The black Armani gown fit her now toned body perfectly. The Louboutin shoes added height and elegance. The Bottega Veneta bag was a final touch of discreet sophistication. But the most important accessory Eleanor carried was invisible: her newfound self-confidence. In the taxi on the way to the London Art Foundation, Eleanor mentally reviewed all the information she had absorbed in the past week. She knew Alexander would be there with Chloe. She knew it would be a public confrontation. She knew their lives would never be the same after that night. But for the first time in 8 years of marriage, Eleanor wasn't afraid. She was ready to show Alexander Chloe and all of London's high society who Eleanor Davies really was. The taxi stopped in front of the futuristic building of the foundation. Eleanor got out of the car with the grace of a princess and walked toward the entrance, where social photographers were documenting the arrival of guests. When Eleanor appeared at the top of the stairs, there was a noticeable moment of silence. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and cameras clicked. Eleanor smiled slightly and descended the stairs with the confidence of someone who had always belonged to that world. Alexander hadn't seen her yet. She spotted him across the main hall, elegant in his tuxedo, laughing at something Chloe had said. Chloe was stunning in a golden dress that probably cost more than a car. But Eleanor noticed something her intensive training had taught her to see. Chloe was trying too hard. The jewelry was excessive for the occasion. The makeup was a bit too heavy, and the dress was too flashy for a cultural event. Chloe was beautiful and elegant, but there was a touch of new money in her presentation that truly sophisticated people would notice immediately. Eleanor, on the other hand, had learned the golden rule of Italian elegance: less is more. She headed to the bar and ordered a Negroni. Not because she particularly liked it, but because she had learned it was the preferred drink of the London elite. While she waited, she complimented the bartender in perfect English and commented on the building's architecture. It was at that moment she felt a fixed gaze on her. She turned and saw Alexander standing a few feet away, with a look of absolute shock on his face. For a moment, Eleanor thought he hadn't recognized her. When he finally did, the expression changed from confusion to utter disbelief. Eleanor smiled serenely, took her drink, and walked toward the husband who had spent months planning to leave her. The war was about to begin. Alexander was completely paralyzed as Eleanor approached. His eyes scanned his wife's transformed look as if he were seeing a ghost. The tuxedo that had always made him look so imposing suddenly seemed ordinary next to the devastating elegance that Eleanor radiated. "Good evening, Alexander," Eleanor said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was calm and controlled, with a sophisticated tone he had never heard before. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" Alexander stammered, looking nervously to the side where Chloe was talking to a group of women near the art. "The same thing as you, I imagine. Appreciating contemporary art, meeting interesting people, participating in the cultural life of London." Eleanor took a sip of her Negroni, maintaining direct eye contact. "Or is there a problem with my presence here?" Alexander tried to recompose himself, but was visibly shaken. "No, of course not. It's just, you never showed any interest in this kind of event." "How interesting." Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "I never showed interest, or you never gave me the opportunity to show it." Before Alexander could reply, Eleanor was interrupted by a feminine voice behind him. "Alexander, love, who's your friend?" Chloe had approached and was now beside Alexander, possessively wrapping her arm around his. She was even more beautiful in person than in pictures, but Eleanor immediately noticed what her intensive training had taught her to see. Chloe was spectacular, but there was something artificial about her beauty. The overly filled lips, the clearly enhanced breasts, the fake tan that didn't match the London winter. "Chloe!" Alexander swallowed hard. This is Eleanor." "Eleanor." Chloe extended her hand with a condescending smile. "Nice to meet you. Do you work in the arts?" Eleanor shook Chloe's hand firmly, maintaining her elegant smile. "I'm a literary translator, and you, Chloe, must be the model who has been dating my husband for the last 18 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander went as pale as a ghost. Chloe snatched her hand back as if she'd been shocked, and a few people nearby stopped talking to pay attention. Your husband?" Chloe looked from Eleanor to Alexander with growing confusion. "Alexander, you told me you were divorced 2 years ago." "Divorced?" Eleanor laughed softly. How curious. Alexander, when exactly did this divorce happen? It must have been while I was asleep because we were still married when you left the house this morning. Alexander tried to intervene desperately. Eleanor, please, let's talk in private. Why? Eleanor raised her voice just enough to attract even more attention. For 18 months, you talked in private with Chloe about our marriage. You told her we were divorced, spent our money to support her, and took her to the events where you said I would be out of place. I think we've had enough private conversations. Don't you agree? Now, a noticeable circle of people was paying attention to the conversation. Eleanor recognized some faces from the social photos she had studied. Important business people, artists, and journalists. Chloe was visibly confused and irritated. Alexander, what is she talking about? You told me your ex-wife was a simple woman who lived in the countryside, and that you had no contact anymore. Ex-wife? Eleanor feigned surprise. Alexander, you told your mistress that I'm your ex-wife? How interesting, considering that last night you slept in our bed, in our house, after kissing me and saying, "Good night, my love." Alexander was visibly sweating. Eleanor, you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Eleanor laughed with genuine bitterness. Alexander, for 8 years you made me believe that I wasn't sophisticated enough to appear in public with you, that I was too simple, too rural, too inadequate for your social circle. She paused dramatically, looking around at the audience that had formed. Do you know what I discovered this week? The problem was never that I wasn't sophisticated enough. The problem was that you needed a diminished woman to feel superior. Chloe was beginning to understand the situation, and her expression changed from confusion to fury. Alexander, you're married? You made me the diamond of a married man for 1.5 years? Chloe, let me explain. Explain what? Chloe was losing her elegant composure. That you've been lying to me since day one. That you've made me look like an idiot at every event where you introduced me as your girlfriend. Eleanor watched the scene with growing satisfaction. Chloe was doing exactly what she had expected, losing emotional control in public, revealing her true nature beneath the veneer of sophistication. Actually, Chloe, Eleanor interjected in a soft voice, you never looked like an idiot. You looked exactly like what you are, a woman who accepts being supported by a married man in exchange for designer bags and expensive trips. The insult was delivered with such elegance that it took a few seconds for Chloe to fully process. When she understood, her reaction was explosive. Who do you think you are to insult me? Alexander told me all about you. A failed woman who never achieved anything in life besides translating insignificant little texts. Insignificant little texts. Eleanor smiled with genuine superiority. Chloe, darling, while you were posting bikini photos on Instagram, I was translating Virginia Woolf and Ian McEwan for a major publisher. While you were depending on my husband's money to maintain your lifestyle, I was building a respected career in the Italian cultural field. Eleanor paused, looking Chloe up and down with elegant disdain. Do you know the fundamental difference between us? You are an accessory, beautiful, decorative, but easily replaceable. I am the protagonist of my own story. Chloe tried to reply, but Eleanor wasn't finished. Alexander, she turned to her husband, who was clearly in shock. You told Chloe that I was inadequate for events like this, that I wouldn't know how to behave in society, that I wouldn't understand conversations about art, politics, or culture. Eleanor gestured elegantly to the surroundings. Well, here I am, at the same event as you, talking about contemporary art, with people you consider important, wearing Armani, drinking a Negroni, behaving exactly like any other sophisticated woman here. She moved closer to Alexander, lowering her voice but keeping it audible to everyone around. Do you know what this proves? That I was always capable of belonging to this world. You're the one who needed to keep me small to feel big. You're the one who needed a diminished wife to justify your need for a mistress who inflated your ego. Alexander tried one last time. Eleanor, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Eleanor interrupted him. You are a coward. A man who doesn't have the courage to own his choices, who lies to two women simultaneously, who builds his self-esteem on the humiliation of other people. She turned to Chloe, who was visibly trying to control tears of anger and humiliation. And you, darling, are exactly the type of woman who accepts a man's crumbs because you don't believe you deserve the main course. You were content to be hidden, to be introduced with half-truths, to be supported like an expensive doll. Eleanor finished her drink and placed the empty glass on a passing tray. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to continue enjoying this magnificent evening. After all, this is exactly the kind of event that Alexander always said I wouldn't know how to appreciate. Eleanor walked away with the elegance of a queen, leaving behind a completely shattered Alexander and a tearful Chloe. For the rest of the night, Eleanor was the absolute center of attention. She talked to diplomats about Portuguese literature, to art critics about the influence of modern architecture on contemporary art, and to business people about cultural opportunities between England and Italy. She received 5 invitations to future events, 3 job offers, and 2 business cards from elegant men interested in getting to know her better. Alexander and Chloe left the event separately, both publicly and irreversibly humiliated. 3 weeks later, Alexander showed up at the apartment, begging to talk. Eleanor received him with the same elegance she had shown at the gala. You were right about everything, he admitted, his eyes red from not sleeping for days. I'm a coward. I destroyed the best thing in my life out of insecurity and arrogance. Chloe left me, Alexander continued. She said I publicly humiliated her, that she could never show her face in society again after what happened. And she was right. Alexander, Eleanor said softly, you taught me a valuable lesson about my own worth. Thank you for that. Eleanor, can we try again? I've changed. No. The answer was firm, but not cruel. You haven't changed, Alexander. You've just discovered the consequences of your choices. And I discovered that I can be happy without you. In fact, I'm happier without you. 6 months later, Eleanor was living in a modern loft in the trendy Shoreditch district, with a thriving career as a cultural translator and her own book being published about her experience of personal rebirth. Alexander tried to rebuild his social reputation, but the public humiliation at the gala had permanently marked him in the elegant circles of London. Chloe moved away, where she tried to restart her influencer career away from the malicious gossip of London society. And Eleanor finally understood that true elegance does not come from expensive dresses or knowledge about wine. It comes from the courage to know your own value and the strength to never accept less than you deserve. The sweetest revenge wasn't destroying Alexander publicly. It was discovering that she had always been extraordinary. She just needed to stop accepting the diminished version of herself that others tried to impose. Eleanor Davies didn't just survive the betrayal. She flourished, and she discovered that some women are not born to be supporting characters in anyone's story. They are born to be the protagonists of their own epic lives. Comment below with your thoughts on Eleanor's revenge and what you think happens next in her life.